Welcome to the Nonfiction Insights channel. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into a book that has really shaped, I think, millions of lives.
Absolutely.
Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People.
It's a classic.
Yeah, and so where do we even begin with a book that's been so influential and for so long?
It's amazing, right? A book published all the way back in 1937 and still sells consistently. I mean, it was considered an overnight sensation back then, and it hasn't stopped selling since.
Wow.
Which makes me think that Carnegie tapped into something very fundamental about human interaction. What do you think about its enduring popularity?
Well, it makes me think that Carnegie wasn't just, coming up with these ideas on his own. He actually studied a lot of successful people, inventors, leaders, business giants,
Yeah.
and he really tried to figure out what made them effective
Right.
in their interactions with other people. Plus, he refined these techniques over years and years of teaching. So it wasn't just theory for him. It was built on actual observation of how people work in the real world.
Makes sense.
And one of the first things he talks about is how we handle people in general. And he starts right off the bat with a principle that sounds simple, but I think is surprisingly tough to actually put into practice.
Yeah.
Don't criticize, condemn, or complain. Why do you think he put so much emphasis on this right at the beginning?
Because he's arguing that criticism is almost always counterproductive. You know, when you criticize someone, it instantly makes them defensive
Yeah.
and resentful. And he even brings up B.F. Skinner's work, where, positive reinforcement was much more effective for learning
Oh, interesting.
than punishment was. And Carnegie believes that condemnation just breeds more negativity without actually leading to any positive change.
It's like telling someone you're doing this wrong, and their immediate reaction is to be like, no, I'm not,
Exactly.
or to justify themselves.
Exactly.
It's not like they suddenly see the light and go, oh, you're right, I should change my ways.
Right.
And he gives that example of George B. Johnston, the safety coordinator,
Mm-hmm.
and how his forceful approach to getting workers to wear their hard hats just wasn't working.
Sure.
It wasn't until he started trying to understand where they were coming from that things actually started to shift.
That's a good point. When people feel attacked, they just dig in their heels. And think about Lincoln. Early on in his career, he was known for writing these biting, sarcastic letters.
Oh, really?
And those letters created lasting animosity. It's a far cry from the later Lincoln. The one who wrote that critical letter to General Meade after Gettysburg, but then chose not to send it.
Oh, right.
He realized that criticizing Meade would probably just make him less effective in the future.
Yeah, it's like he realized that the relationship and their future effectiveness was more important than just getting that anger out.
Exactly.
And then there's that example of Hoover with the mechanic who messed up his plane, a pretty serious mistake.
Oh, yeah.
But instead of yelling at the guy, Hoover actually showed trust in him by having him service the plane again, which, probably did a lot more
Absolutely.
to ensure that the mechanic would be extra careful in the future
Of course.
than any amount of scolding would have.
Yeah, so it's not just about avoiding saying mean things.
Yeah.
It's really about understanding the negative impact that criticism itself has.
Okay, so we've talked about not criticizing, condemning, or complaining.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the flip side of that? What does Carnegie suggest we do instead?
He says we should give honest and sincere appreciation.
Okay.
He believed that every human being has a deep desire to feel important, and he points to all these historical figures who clearly craved recognition.
Why do you think that need for significance is so powerful?
I think it's almost primal, We want to feel like we matter,
Yeah.
like what we do has value and that people see and appreciate our contributions. Carnegie even mentions people who might go to the extreme of retreating into delusion just to feel important.
Wow.
Which really highlights how strong that need is. And, when you think about Andrew Carnegie paying Charles Schwab such a huge salary, a big part of that was because of Schwab's ability to connect with people
Right.
and make them feel appreciated.
Yeah, it makes you think that we often underestimate the impact of just acknowledging someone's worth.
All the time.
Yeah, and he has that story about the farm woman who served her family hay
Mm-hmm.
instead of dinner because they never appreciated all the years she spent cooking for them.
No.
They only noticed when that expected appreciation was suddenly gone.
Right. And then he brings up the fact that lack of appreciation is one of the main reasons why wives run away.
Wow, that's really telling. It's
Oh.
it's not always about these big gestures of appreciation. Sometimes it's the small, consistent acknowledgments that really matter most. And Carnegie makes a really important distinction here. He says that there's a big difference between genuine appreciation and flattery.
Huge.
Yeah, because flattery is insincere. It's shallow. and it can actually be harmful in the long run.
Right.
True appreciation comes from genuinely noticing and valuing something specific about the other person.
Exactly. Emerson has this great quote about it. He says, "Every man I meet is my superior in some way, in that I learn of him."
Mhm.
It encourages us to look for the good in others and acknowledge it instead of constantly judging them.
Okay, so we've got don't criticize, condemn, or complain. Give honest and sincere appreciation. What's the third principle?
Arouse in the other person an eager want.
Okay, what does that even mean?
It means understanding what truly drives people, their desires, and then showing them how what you're proposing can help them achieve those desires.
So it's not about tricking them or manipulating them.
No, not at all. It's about aligning your goals with theirs. For example, instead of just telling kids that smoking is bad, you could explain how it can negatively impact their performance in sports. Well, that's clever.
It connects the behavior you want them to adopt with something they already care about.
That makes sense.
Carnegie tells this great story about Emerson and his son who were trying to force a calf into the barn, but the calf wouldn't budge. Then the Irish housemaid came along and let the calf suckle her finger, and just like that, she let it right into the barn.
Wow.
Emerson and his son were focused on what they wanted, but the housemaid understood what the calf wanted.
It's all about perspective.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And Harry Overstreet sums this up perfectly. He says, action springs out of what we fundamentally desire. First, arouse in the other person an eager want.
It's a good quote.
Carnegie himself used this principle when he was trying to negotiate his rent. Instead of arguing for a lower price, he focused on the hotel manager's desire for profitability and showed him how a big rent increase could actually hurt his business in the long run. Much more persuasive approach, right? Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
And he contrasts that with like a really poorly written business letter that was all about what the sender wanted and completely ignored what the recipient might need or want.
Right.
And of course, it didn't work.
Unsurprising.
But then you've got Barbara L. Anderson's job application, which was entirely focused on how she could help the banks achieve their goals.
Mm-hmm.
And she got like multiple interview offers.
Exactly. It's about framing your message in terms of their benefit.
Right.
There's also the story of Michael E. Whiddon, who motivated a service station owner by appealing to his desire for recognition, and the parents who solved their son's bedwetting problem by understanding his simple wants.
Okay, so these first three principles, they really seem to set the stage for how to interact with people effectively.
I think so.
But now let's dive into the actual like how to make people like you part. And the first one is become genuinely interested in other people.
Okay.
I mean, this sounds almost too simple.
Right.
But what's the real power behind this?
Well, it's a fundamental shift in focus. You know, Carnegie tells the story of his dog, Tippy, who could make friends with anyone just by showing genuine interest.
Oh.
And he contrasts that with how much harder it is to get other people interested in you. It's about looking outward instead of inward.
And it's not just about these big interactions. He has that example of Edward M. Sykes Jr., the sales representative,
Oh, yeah.
who kept a huge account
Yeah.
by first showing interest in the soda and the sales clerks
Mm-hmm.
before even talking to the owner.
Smart.
It's like building rapport at every level.
It is.
Yeah.
And, you know, even busy, important people respond to genuine interest. Like, if you express sincere admiration for an author's work, it can open doors.
Oh,
And that letter praising the bank staff for their courtesy shows that those small acts of genuine care are really valued.
but here's the thing. You can't really fake genuine interest, can you?
No, I don't think so.
People can usually tell if you're just going through the motions. It has to be real.
It does.
Okay, so the next one is smile.
Okay.
Another one that seems super simple. But how much of an impact can a smile actually have?
A huge impact. A smile is a universal sign of liking and happiness. Think about a baby's smile. It can instantly diffuse tension in a room full of strangers.
Yeah, it's like an automatic positive trigger.
Exactly.
And it's contagious, too.
It is.
I mean, Professor James V. McConnell even said that people who smile are more effective in managing, teaching, and selling.
Makes sense.
And then you've got Robert Cryer, who hired a top PhD candidate, partly because his phone demeanor conveyed genuine interest.
Oh, wow.
So even when you're not face-to-face,
Yeah.
a positive attitude can really shine through.
Absolutely. And there's that incredible story of the stockbroker whose entire life and career changed just because he started smiling at everyone.
It's like acting as if, right?
Exactly.
If you act cheerful, you might actually start to feel more cheerful.
That's what William James suggested.
Yeah, and Carnegie points out that happiness is often an internal state. It's influenced by our thoughts and actions more than our external circumstances. So Senora Maria Gonzalez made tons of friends at work just by smiling and greeting people. It's like a simple way to break down barriers.
It is,
Yeah.
and it's like Christmas spirit. It's much more valuable when you give it away.
Okay, number 3 is remember that a person's name is to that person the sweetest and most important sound in any language.
That's a mouthful.
Yeah, but it really emphasizes the power of personalization, doesn't it?
It does. Jim Farley had this incredible ability to remember names, and it was crucial to Franklin D. Roosevelt's political success.
Oh, how so?
Well, Farley made it his mission to remember people's names and details about their lives, and that helped him and Roosevelt build a huge base of support.
Wow, so his system for remembering names must have been amazing. He wrote hundreds of letters a day
Yeah.
and could still recall personal details months later.
I know, it's dedication.
And then there's that negative example of the form letter where they misspelled the guy's name.
Oh, yeah.
And it just shows you how much people notice when their name isn't handled with care. For sure. Even Andrew Carnegie understood this from a young age. He used his knowledge of names to get what he wanted even as a child.
Really?
Yeah, and later on he used it strategically in business negotiations with someone like Pullman.
That's smart.
And think about how often buildings are named after donors. It shows you how much people value that kind of personal recognition.
Absolutely.
But why do we forget names so often?
Carnegie says it's simply because we don't put in the effort. We don't concentrate, repeat, and actively try to fix those names in our minds. But people like Franklin D. Roosevelt, who made a point of remembering even the names of mechanics, show that it's possible if you really focus on it.
Right, and even Napoleon had a whole system for memorizing names.
Exactly. And then there's Ken Nottingham, who had this positive experience at his company cafeteria just because he used the counterwoman's name. It's a small gesture, but it made her feel seen and appreciated.
Okay, so that's 3. What's number 4?
Be a good listener. Encourage others to talk about themselves. Carnegie tells a story about being at a bridge party and being considered a great conversationalist, simply because he listened attentively.
Interesting.
And Charles W. Eliot, the former president of Harvard, said that nothing is more flattering than giving someone your exclusive attention.
Makes sense.
It's about truly focusing on what the other person is saying.
And there's that example of the troubleshooter who successfully dealt with a really angry customer just by patiently listening to his complaints.
Oh, yeah.
And Mr. Detmer, who resolved a payment dispute by really listening to the customer's perspective
Yeah.
and acknowledging that he might actually be right.
Sometimes people just need to feel heard.
Right.
And there's that amazing story of a Western Union messenger boy who basically educated himself by listening to and asking questions of all the famous people he delivered telegrams to.
Wow.
He became a really well-rounded individual, simply because he was a good listener.
That's a great example.
And Carnegie reminds us that people are inherently more interested in their own lives and problems than they are in ours.
Okay, so number 5 is talk in terms of the other person's interests.
Exactly.
This seems to build on that idea of understanding what people desire and
Yeah.
then tailoring your conversation to those desires.
Right. Theodore Roosevelt was known for reading up on his visitors' interests the night before he was going to meet with them.
Really?
He wanted to be able to connect with them on their level.
That's amazing.
And William Lionfeld's aunt gave this great advice. She said, to make yourself agreeable, talk about what interests the other person.
It's so simple, but so true.
It is.
So Edward L. Chalif got a huge favor by showing interest in the corporation president's framed $1 million check. And a bread salesman finally landed a big hotel account by discussing the manager's passion for the Greeter Society.
Interesting.
And Edward E. Harriman got a job interview
Mm-hmm.
by researching and showing interest in R.J. Funkhauser's really unusual career path.
That's clever.
It shows you the power of focusing on the other person's passions. It's not about manipulating them. It's about genuinely engaging with what they care about. And Howard Z. Herzig said that talking in terms of other people's interests can even lead to personal enrichment.
That makes sense.
Okay, last but not least. Number 6 is make the other person feel important and do it sincerely.
Yes, this one brings us full circle, back to that fundamental human need for significance.
Right, and he gives that little story about complimenting a barber on his hair
Yeah.
and instantly making him feel good.
It's a small gesture, but it has a big impact.
But Carnegie warns us about being insincere. The feeling of importance you convey have to be genuine.
Absolutely. And Shakespeare reminds us of this too. He wrote about man's often unjustified pride. It means people can sense when you're not being sincere.
Right.
So the Connecticut attorney who received a car from his elderly relative got it because he genuinely appreciated her belongings and memories. And the judge who gave away a valuable puppy to someone who admired his hobby. Those are both examples of the rewards of sincere appreciation.
Even George Eastman, who was already super accomplished, craved recognition. And James Adamson got a big order from him by admiring his office and discussing his company's history.
It shows you that this need to feel important is universal, no matter how successful you are.
This whole section is about shifting your focus outward
Right.
and making other people feel valued and heard.
I think so.
So to sum it all up, it seems like a lot of these principles boil down to empathy and a genuine interest in other people's perspectives, their interests and their need for recognition.
Right.
These 6 principles, while they seem pretty straightforward, offer a really powerful framework for building better relationships.
I agree.
So as we've explored these principles from how to win friends and influence people, what stands out to you the most?
For me, it's the importance of genuineness. It's not about using tricks or techniques to manipulate people. It's about changing how you see and interact with them. It's about valuing their perspectives and making them feel truly seen and appreciated.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And I think the most important takeaway for our listeners is to think about how they can actually integrate these principles into their daily lives. How can you avoid criticizing? Offer sincere appreciation. Understand people's desires. Show genuine interest. Remember names. Be a better listener. Talk about what interests them. And make them feel important. These are things we can practice every day. And they can really enrich our connections with other people.
Absolutely. It's not a one-time fix. It's a continuous way of engaging with the world.
It is.
Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive into Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. We hope you found it insightful and helpful. And please subscribe to the Nonfiction Insights channel for more explorations into influential ideas.